All right, so this is the question tonight. Is the tetanus vaccine laced with contraceptives or not? That is the question on the minds of so many Kenyans who are confused because they're getting different opinions from the government, from Catholic leaders, and they do not know who exactly to believe on this. In studio, I have Ahmed Khaleb, Managing Director, Lancet. Thank you so much for joining us on KTN Prime. And of course, the reason why we're bringing you into this discussion is because your laboratory is one of the laboratories that conducted one of these tests for the Catholic Church. So when did your laboratory conduct the test for the Catholic leaders?
If I recall fully correctly, we received some samples. We found out that we received some samples in May this year, which we tested like any other routine sample that comes to our laboratory because it was submitted by one of the doctors who is well known to us. And after we tested, we are not aware of the actual sample or that actually it was a vaccine. So it was run like any other routine sample, and our result was provided. I think subsequently.
What were the results?
So the
in
layman's language, yes, the results which were done for the human sample showed that the there was no clinically significant beta HCG values. In other words, the values that were there is what we call to be within the normal reference range. Now, if I talk about normal reference range, most people will probably be able to identify with something like a blood sugar. When you go to do a blood sugar test in a laboratory, or you use your blood glucometer for testing your blood sugar, it tells you your results. It gives you a certain figure. Now, that value, we as doctors, in the clinical context, we say it is normal or abnormal. So in this case, the results which were given were within the normal, not abnormal. In other words, they are not elevated. So subsequently, we had, again, through social media and contacts, that the Catholic Church had said that our laboratory had been used and it had confirmed the testing. What
levels did you get in your results?
At that particular point, I think it was 1.2, and the reference range is 0 to 5.
1.2.
Yes.
Insignificant as this would be, what level of HCG would cause a miscarriage?
So I think this is something I have to explain, and I think that's where the Catholic Church's concern comes in, which I find scientifically legitimate in the way they are arguing about it. What basically happens with this whole controversy, as we call it, is that previously there have been instances where the various scientists have experimented. The beta HCG is a hormone that is found in women when they are pregnant, or it can also be found with certain type of cancers associated with the uterus. So what happens is, if somebody is injected with beta HCG, they will develop antibodies against it, and that's basically what vaccination does. It develops antibodies. So in this particular instance, the church is claiming, based on previous stories, that when you inject somebody with beta HCG, irrespective of the amount, you will develop some antibodies, and that has been shown experimentally can lead to miscarriage. As we speak, I'm not aware of any proper proof of concept in terms of population that it can actually be used. So the conspiracy then goes that maybe this is a way to go ahead and test that vaccine. The use of the beta HCG to control the population, yes. So when we got this sample to test, we are not aware, but we are told to test it for HCG, which we did. We got a value of 1.2. As I said, the normal reference range is 0 to 5. However, the way we tested it, which I have found out from the other labs as well, without knowing, they tested it as if it was a human blood sample. But this was not a human blood sample. Okay. This was a vaccine.
Hold on. What samples were brought to your lab? What samples should have been brought to your lab?
Okay, so our labs or laboratories that test human beings are not designed, and they are not meant for testing chemical substances and compounds. We are specialized to test human tissue samples. I'm talking about blood, urine, and other fluids. So we don't test compounds, we don't test vaccines, we don't test water in the environment. We do testing on human samples. So in this particular case, the results we gave are in the context of the human samples. And that is why when we found out and we conducted subsequent tests, then we actually advised the ministry, and we advised the Catholic Church, who are all my good friends, and we work a lot with them and have a lot of respect for them. We told them, wait a minute, these results that you found, you cannot interpret it in the context you are discussing. You need further tests that will be appropriate for that particular testing. And that's what the Parliamentary Committee is saying, that a joint exercise is required and the appropriate test be done.
Okay, so basically what you're saying, Ahmed, is that the tests that were carried out in your lab by the Catholic Church were inappropriate?
They were inappropriate for that particular exercise because these were vaccine samples, and all the labs that I'm aware of, there are about 5 other labs whose results we have and they are presented today at the Parliament Committee. Those labs are not testing vaccine samples in the context of testing vaccine samples. They receive these samples as if they are serum samples. Now, the way you interpret a urine sample, a blood sample, is different from the way you will interpret a vaccine sample. Or if somebody brought you, let's say, Coca-Cola and told you, can you test whether this Coca-Cola has a certain thing? You'll test it differently. They're not supposed to be tested in laboratories for human testing. Our laboratories are accredited for testing blood samples, human samples, not chemical substances. There are laboratories to do that, which are mainly used by manufacturers and the pharmaceutical industry.
So therefore what you're saying is that there is a chance that Catholic leaders misinterpreted the results that they received.
I've actually discussed it with them. I've discussed it with the Ministry of Health, and I've told them that the interpretation of those results, in fact, out of all the labs, all the results that we got were what we say are below the limit of quantitation. When you say they are below the limit of quantitation, it means even if you brought distilled water to the laboratory and you tested it, it will give you a value. It's just like, for example, when I say, when you are stopped by the policeman and you are told to blow on the alcohol blow, it gives you a figure. By that I mean that you took alcohol. The figure has to be above a certain level for you to say analytically that level means there is that substance. So from the tests we did on those samples, if it was a human sample, we will not be able to say and say categorically that there is HCG in that sample or not.
Dr. Ahmed, lots of confusion in the country. Finally, before I let you go, what is the way forward?
I think the way forward, and I believe the Cabinet Secretary for Health actually mentioned this. It was in the papers on Monday, saying that a committee is going to be formed. And this committee will consist of experts in the laboratory, experts in the pharmaceutical industries. I think the stakeholders and the Catholic Church who have raised legitimate concerns, and these issues need to be addressed properly. I think that committee then needs to advise way forward. Now, the way forward for me is that the samples should be collected. They should be collected properly. In other words, we need to receive sealed vaccines. And everybody must be sure that these vaccines have not been tampered with so that everybody is happy. Those samples should then be submitted to the correct laboratory for testing vaccines or testing non-human samples. After it has been tested, we're using the correct method because all the other laboratories use what we call immunoassay. Now, for vaccine samples, you need to use what we call high-performance liquid chromatography and gas spectrometry, which is, we call it HPLC. It is more an industrial type of testing. Now, once that is tested, it should be able to say what are the components within that vaccine. And of those components, what are the levels? And at that point, we'll be able to know the truth.
We'll have a clear picture.
Yes.
Dr. Ahmed Kalebi, Managing Director, Lancet, thank you so much for sharing your insight and helping Kenyans, really millions out there, to understand the position that is now being put across by Catholic leaders. Dr. Ahmed Kalebi, they are saying Catholic leaders may have misinterpreted the results, and probably there is a need to have fresh results, fresh examinations carried out in different labs all over the country, just to give a clear direction on where this needs to head. Thank you so much for watching this interview, and I hope it has in so many ways cleared the mind of so many Kenyans out there. Ben.